Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. It's just Marco here once again, and I am here today to do something that actually Safi came up with. You know, it's really hilarious because Safi, she pretends that she's so anti-ranking, anti-lists, and what's the first thing that she comes up with for like an idea for me to do? She says, "Why don't you rank cringeworthy TV episodes?" And I was like, really? Okay, so this is the top 25 cringeworthiest TV episodes that I can think of. You know, there are definitely more. It was really hard to distinguish what was cringeworthy versus what was just bad. Like, there was and then, of course, it had to be like a majority cringeworthy. You know, it couldn't just have a cringeworthy moment here or there. You know, so like, there was this particular episode of a show where this guy makes a really weird sound during sex with the main character, and it is really, really cringeworthy because, you know, she's doing something bad by sleeping with him, and it was just a horrible, the worst episode of the whole series. However, the whole episode was not cringeworthy. It just had like a cringeworthy moment or two. And so, speaking of the same show, number 25 is Better Call Saul, Season 4, Episode 6, Pinata. This episode was the worst episode of the series until seasons 5 and 6 happened. And for one, it had like this really mediocre, lame story where Saul was selling cell phones and there were these guys who robbed him, and in this episode he got them back, and I think he stole all the money back, and he hung them up in like a piñata store and had these two guys, I think it might have been Huel was one of them, and they kind of intimidated these thieves. And, you know, if it was just that story alone, that story was like a C, maybe like a C plus. But it was just really lame and didn't really... I mean, everything about the whole show after season 3 was trash, pretty much. But that was... But the real cringeworthiness is the main story of the episode. So, the main character, him and his girlfriend, they started a law firm together. Or not a law firm, but... They both had their own law firms next to each other in the same building, and it was like a really positive thing, and they were, you know, it seemed like they were building something really good, and they were both doing what they loved to do, and it was a pretty great storyline, and I really loved it, and I thought, I can't wait to see where this goes, and how they break up, like how they eventually... You know, maybe they both do bad things, or maybe one or the other. I couldn't wait to see what would happen. And then in season 3, Jimmy, his law license is taken away from him for a year. So then they get rid of the office building, and they say they can always get another office building. And then in season 4, Kim turns into a bitch, and she starts becoming the worst character in television history. And in this episode, the whole thing is basically leading up to her breaking up with him in terms of like having a business, like businesses in the same building. Like, it was so horrible what she did to him, because she also joined another law firm instead of continuing to do her own firm, and it just felt like a clear betrayal of the character, and also a clear betrayal of Jimmy, her boyfriend, and I thought it was awful. The whole episode just led up to this. Jimmy was looking forward to talking about it with her again, and he was drawing pictures of their logo like a little kid drawing like fantasy doodles. And it was just so sickening to see her break his heart like this. And it felt like, that was something positive and hopeful for him to look forward to, and for her to look forward to, too. And instead, she ruins it so that she can, make everything about her and join this, successful firm and get all this money and acclamation instead of building it honestly from the ground up. So that episode was terrible, but it didn't have enough cringeworthy moments to put it, to have it be higher. It was basically just a couple of cringeworthy moments leading up to that, and then that moment itself, when she breaks up with him. In terms of, I don't know how to say it. Like she didn't break up with him as a romantic interest, though. Number 24 is Mayberry RFD Season 1 Episode 20, Sam the Expert Farmer. This is a really cringeworthy episode where Sam, he's this farmer, and it's kind of like this comedic story where his girlfriend Millie, she is farming tomatoes for fun, or she's growing tomatoes for fun, and she manages to grow tomatoes that are fucking huge. Meanwhile, all the farmers are struggling, especially Sam. And so Sam gets jealous of her, and he starts treating her badly as a boyfriend, all because she's growing bigger vegetables than him, which we all know what that was a metaphor for. And that just makes it even more queer, even more cringeworthy. And then at the end, I think like she had to do something to make it look like she wasn't as successful or something. Like, it was just so cringeworthy, the fact that it's like this could have been a funny episode, but instead it was just mean-spirited. Number 23 is Californication Season 3, Episode 5, Slow Happy Boys. Now, there are a couple of episodes of Californication that are cringeworthy. There was this one where the main character, he had a bump on his testicle, and that was really cringeworthy because, you really didn't want anything bad to come of that, and there was all this other stuff. But that episode was pretty damn good, except for that one thing. And then they had another episode where he gets a vasectomy, and there's some gross, cringeworthy stuff with that, too. In fact, later on in the episode, he gets hit multiple times in the junk by a policeman, and it's just awful to watch. But it's actually a great episode, though. Like, I couldn't put it on this list because these are mostly bad episodes. But Slow Happy Boys, the episode in question, this is an episode that I actually avoid, or I used to avoid it, because it's all about this friend of the main character, Hank, and he comes back to town because he's running away from his responsibility with his wife. He has some sort of a brain issue, and he needs to get it taken care of, and his wife is worried about him, but he just wants to avoid it. And so it's really, really cringeworthy because the way that the best friend acts is just so crude and gross, and it's just like, ugh, the whole episode is just them hanging out together. It ends up being pretty, good at the end, because we find out that the best friend, the reason why he was like that was because he was sick, and so he was not himself when he was acting like that. And so it's just really cringeworthy though. Like, I really, I don't like watching it. Like, Californication has a lot of cringeworthy moments, but it's mostly cringe on purpose. And sometimes that can be pretty good as well. Number 22 is Hell on Wheels, Season 3, Episode 2, Imminent Domain. Now, this one was actually a 2-part premiere, and I thought it was a pretty good premiere, but this episode in particular, ooh God. So basically, it's all about this guy named Cullen, and he's working with the eastern half of the railroad, and they're building this railroad all across the country, and he has to convince this Mormon family to give up their land so that they can run the train through where their house is. And he runs into an issue because the family, they just don't want to go. And there's this one guy in particular, and he does some bad shit and commits murder. And there's this whole plot around that too, where we see this teenage boy who committed this murder. We see him get put in a noose, and it's a really cringeworthy scene because, it's like this is what it was like back then in the Wild West. Like, all these people were watching, his family was watching, and they hang him, and it was terrible. It was very negative and cringeworthy. But the real cringeworthy moment came from when Cullen. He is a weirdo, okay? Like, he's got some weird moments as a character, and this was number one on those moments. So, there was a teenage girl in the Mormon family named Naomi, and he looks at her, and it's one of those really cringeworthy, cliche scenes where two characters look at each other, and then they have sex immediately in the next scene. So it already was cringeworthy, but just the fact that this girl is a teenager, and we see Cullen having sex with her in the barn, and they're naked, and then they actually find out, and we see them, and it's just, oh my God, it's so, like, you cannot make up, like, how cringeworthy that was. Like, it was so uncomfortable, the fact that, the main character that we're following here, he's done some questionable things in terms of killing people, but this just takes it to a whole other level. I mean, he's a pedophile. And then in season 5, his main love interest is this Asian teenage girl. And so he's still a pedophile seasons later. It's like they were just perfectly content with making this character into a pedophile. And I thought, like, why would they do that to this great character? He lost his love interest in season 2 in the finale, and it was really heartbreaking and sad. And then immediately after, they just turned him into a pedophile. And it was so cringe. Number 21 is Mayberry RFD, Season 1, Episode 1, Andy Gets Married. Now, this episode is actually pretty decent, okay? It doesn't have a lot of laughs. A lot of the Mayberry RFD episodes are lacking in laughs. And, of course, Mayberry RFD is a spin-off of the Andy Griffith Show. Andy Griffith is hardly in the show. This episode is one of the only times, and it is actually Barney's last appearance on a Andy Griffith TV show. So it was actually kind of a great episode, but at the same time, it was really cringeworthy because of what happened in real life. So during the whole making of the Andy Griffith Show, the Andy Griffith was having an affair with the actress who played his love interest, Helen. And, I have no problem with that. Like, if actors like hooked up because they just got so close from doing a role. That's perfectly normal. That happens all the time. But they were having an affair, and Andy had children, and he had a wife he was married to, and she was in love with him, and so she proposed to him 3 times, and he rejected her all 3 times. And I just thought it was so cringe knowing that, and then watching this episode, because you can tell that the actress playing Helen, it's like she's living out her fantasy of what she wanted to do in real life. And it would have been fine, like, number one, if they were both single and then he just didn't want to be with her, that'd be fine. That wouldn't be that cringeworthy. Or if they actually did get married in real life, that wouldn't be cringeworthy to have them married on the show as well. But it's the fact that Andy was married, and the fact that he rejected her 3 times. She deserved a lot better than that. And so it was really cringeworthy to watch this. Like, it's just, it's uncomfortable to watch, knowing that true story. And sorry about that. Now the computer chair is going to squeak all the time. Number 20 is Leave It to Beaver Season 2, Episode 17, Beaver Plays Hooky. This is an episode that gives me a stomach ache even thinking about it. I had a hard time watching certain episodes of this show as a kid, because I just felt like they treated Beaver horribly in terms of, like, not like the parents, but like the show. Like, the way that the show was making the story, it was very mean-spirited, and it was really hard to watch. This is one of those episodes. It's all about how Beaver and his friend Larry, they're going to school and they're late for the 3rd day in a row. Honestly, if that were me, I would just skip school and pretend I was sick. Because I had a couple of times where I was late and I got yelled at in front of the entire class, and it was much worse than if I would have just skipped school and then go there the next day. So I completely understood why Beaver and Larry just skipped school. And, because it wasn't because they didn't want to go to school. It was because they didn't want to be late and face these mean old teachers. So you completely understand why they're doing this, but the episode, it makes it out to seem like they're doing something really, really evil. And then there's this part where, their lunch is destroyed, their lunch boxes, so they need some food, they're starving. And they go to this set at a grocery store where they're giving free samples of chocolate bars while this wannabe cowboy loser films like a television promotion about the candy bars. And it's so cringeworthy because everyone is able to see Beaver and Larry on television. Not only that, but Wally, his brother, is sick for real. And so they're kind of making it out to seem like Beaver is purposefully skipping school because he wants to skip school. And it's like, oh, meanwhile, Wally is really sick. And it's like, there's just so many things wrong about this episode, and so many bullshit things that the writers don't even care about. It's just all about the agenda of like, ooh, a kid skips school? That's the worst thing a kid could ever do. And so the cowboy interviews the kids, and the way that he talks to them, he's really mean-spirited, and he makes jokes about like, later on their parents are going to physically abuse them because they found out that they skipped school, And it's like, God, this episode is so negative. It's so mean-spirited and awful. But the worst part is when Beaver comes home and his parents force him to go back to school. And so he is forced to go to school and talk to the teacher. And this is the reason why I do not like Mrs. Camfield or Miss Camfield. You know, I know that the actress died at an early age, which is very sad. But the character I do not like. I much prefer... Wait a second. Which teacher is which? I want to make sure that... Okay. Because I want to make sure that that one is the right one. Oh, no, sorry. The one that I do not like is Mrs. Landers. He had another teacher before her, and her name was Mrs. Camfield, and she was actually a great character, and I thought that she was a great teacher. But Mrs. Landers, she goes straight into Karen mode, and she forces Beaver to sit there and listen to this cringeworthy ass lecture about why it's bad to skip school. It's really, really bad. And, you know, it is the most Karen speech you've ever heard, because she's like, I'm not sad, Beaver. I'm sad for you because you missed class and you missed learning with all the other kids. You're now behind. You're dragging along those other kids. I'm sad for you. And I was like, ugh! Like, just fuck off. Like, just seriously, like, that's just such bullshit. And it was just clear that the network of this television network, they probably said, if you do an episode about them skipping school, you cannot glorify them skipping school. You have to make all this effort to explain why it's bad to skip school. And so it just feels like lecture-y, the whole episode, and just cringeworthy, the whole story. And oh yeah, and then they mention at the end that Larry gets physically abused by his dad for the millionth time, which is always a great thing too. Like, just really sickening, this episode. So, number 19, The X-Files, Season 11, Episode 1, My Struggle, Part 3. This is one of the worst television episodes ever made in history, because it wipes away everything from the past season of the revival, and it makes you question, why did they even do all of that if they weren't going to follow through on what they were doing? And it was like they painted themselves into a corner with the story and the cliffhanger. It was really disappointing, though. But the main thing that was cringeworthy was that we find out that this beloved character from the series named Monica, we find out that she is sleeping with the main villain of the show, the Smoking Man, and she is forced into being his right-hand assistant. She's kind of like the Darth Vader to his Emperor, but that's not the most cringeworthy part, because they ruined her character. The most cringeworthy part is that we find out that the baby that Scully is pregnant with, the main character, we find out that the cigarette man raped her off screen, and he impregnated her, and he is the father of her baby. That was just such a slap in the face to Mulder fans. It was such a slap in the face to the series, to the characters. And the worst part is that there's this old episode from season 7 of the show where Scully and the cigarette man go on a road trip together, and it's actually a pretty good episode. But now it's forever tainted, because we know that that's when he rapes her. according to the revival's canon. So, number 18 is The Andy Griffith Show, Season 8, Episode 10, Aunt Bee and the Lecturer. This episode is just one of many episodes where Aunt Bee makes you cringe the whole time. This one, though, is not because of her. It's because of another guy who never appeared on the show again. And it is a really bizarre storyline where this lecturer comes to town to talk about his African safari, and he meets Aunt Bee, and he falls in love with her, and it's actually pretty funny too, because it's just so bizarre. They have this meeting in this dark room together, and he tells her that she looks like his dead wife, and it is the most creepiest, it is just so cringeworthy. It makes me sick to even think about it, and it's like, oh god. And the way that they filmed it too, he's like in the dark, like it's a horror movie, and he's gonna like do something bad to her. It's just really, really creepy and cringeworthy. So, like, it would be fine if like there was a romantic story about like some guy who got with a woman because she looked like his dead love interest, but the way that they executed this idea was beyond cringeworthy. Number 17 is The Office, Season 4, Episode 9, Dinner Party. Now, this episode is notoriously cringeworthy. I have a different take on it, though. I feel like this episode is more depressing than cringeworthy. I feel like it's a very well written episode because it all takes place at the house with Jan and Michael and a couple of employees, and it's just so great because it just keeps building and building. The comedy, the jokes, they just keep getting better and better. I think my favorite joke is probably the one where Jan says that Michael broke the sliding glass window or the sliding glass door because he thought he heard an ice cream truck, and so he tried to run outside. And so that's another thing. This actually is a good episode, and it's very, very funny. It is very depressing because Michael is in this abusive relationship, and it's really uncomfortable to watch. Number 16 is Mayberry RFD, Season 1, Episode 16, Aunt Bee and the Cruise Part 2. So in Aunt Bee and the Cruise Part 1, Aunt Bee meets the captain of a ship when she is taking a cruise, which is pretty bizarre in and of itself. I mean, Aunt Bee taking a cruise. Ugh. But she meets the captain of the ship, falls in love with him, and they want to get married, and he wants to retire. And it's cringeworthy because it's such like a positive thing, and it feels like, oh great, this is nice that they're progressing the characters. But then Aunt Bee, she is just such a dipshit. I mean, she has so many cringeworthy moments. You could just make a list ranking Aunt Bee's worst moments. Aunt Bee sees this soap opera where this sea captain tells his love interest that he can't be with her because he'll always love the ocean, and the ocean will always be his number one love interest. Like, what the fuck? And so you guys aren't going to believe this. Aunt Bee breaks up their marriage, convinces the captain that he doesn't want to retire, and then, like, cries the rest of the episode like it was just inevitable that it was going to happen. Like, it was such an awful thing, and it was so, like, unexpected, because you're just thinking, like, you're going to get married to this guy who wanted to retire, and you saw a TV episode from a soap opera, and the soap opera, Number 15 is The X-Files, Season 11, Episode 10, My Struggle Part 4. This is the cringeworthy conclusion to the X-Files series as we know it. It's basically all an abortion allegory, and this is what makes it cringeworthy. The whole episode is all about how their son, Scully and the Cigarette Man's son, he never should have been born to begin with, so it's actually a good thing that he's going to die at the end. And because it was a mistake. And so it's like basically just like an abortion allegory, the whole episode. And yeah, I don't even want to talk about X-Files anymore. I'm done with that show. Number 14 is Luke Cage, Season 2, Episode 1, Soul Brother Number 1. Now, this episode is all because of one moment where Luke Cage dabs for the news camera. I was really excited about watching Luke Cage Season 2 because I knew it was going to be dumb fun. But Lucy Liu directed it, and she turned it into like kind of like a feminazi show too. And it all culminated in this queer moment where Luke Cage looks at the camera, says something, I don't know, like, we're all together, brothers, I don't know. I can't remember because it was so bad. And then he dabs, but he doesn't even dab correctly. He puts his head in his arm, and then 5 seconds later he bops his head down, and it's so cringeworthy because it's not how you dab. You're supposed to do it at the same time. You don't even do it like that, and it was like, oh God, what are we doing here? Just because at the time everyone was into dabbing because they're fucking retards, that doesn't mean you make Luke Cage dab. I mean, before She-Hulk happened with her whole disgusting twerking feminazi agenda scene moment, there was this moment, and I feel like the fact that people pretended like people have never criticized like a male superhero show when they did something like this. Well, what do you know? Luke Cage Season 2, Episode 1, that dab scene is equally bad as the twerking scene with Slut Hulk. So number 13 is Mayberry RFD Season 2, Episode 12, Millie and the Palm Springs Golf Pro. This episode is all about how the gang has gone to Palm Springs, California, and Sam introduces his friend to this to his girlfriend. Did I say his to her or her to? Sam introduces Millie to his friend, and he is a golfer, and he is so creepy and cringeworthy. I mean, where to begin? They have a little implication at the beginning where they talk about how he did some really crazy things in the war, which probably means like raping women somewhere, because this guy, he definitely was a rapist. I mean, this episode should have been called Millie and the Palm Springs Rapist, because Sam leaves Millie alone with his friend, knowing how he is, quote unquote. And the golfing guy, he starts doing the typical like golfing thing where you use it as an opportunity to get really close to a woman, and he does that with her even though he knows that she is with Sam. And it's uncomfortable to watch. It's very cringe. But the worst part is when he's driving her home at night, and this is when it gets full on creepy as hell. And he forces himself on her, and he's kissing her, and she has to scream at the top of her lungs to get him off of her. And it's clear that, like, I'm really against those people that act like, kisses are sexual assault. Like, did you ask consent before you kiss someone? Like, no, I'm not like that. Like, but this right here, what this guy does to Millie, it is definitely sexual assault. Like, the way that he was in the scene. And it was so cringe. Goober saw it too, and then Goober thinks that she was doing it with him on purpose, and so that just makes it even more cringe. A misunderstanding, a comedic misunderstanding. But then, unbelievably, the next day, Millie confronts Sam about what his rapist friend did, and Sam laughs. Sam laughs at Millie and laughs at his friend because he's like, he's always like that. Yeah, he's just a really friendly rapist. and then Millie is, she's mad because he's not taking this seriously, and then Sam gets angry at Millie. And he gets angry at his girlfriend because she's mad she got sexually assaulted by his best friend. So, So the rest of the episode is even more cringeworthy because the show treats Millie like she's a child and she's making a big deal about nothing and she should just get over it and accept what happened. And it's just so cringeworthy because she ends up apologizing to Sam, of all things, for being sexually assaulted. And it is unbelievable. It is so bad. It's awful. I didn't even want to watch the show anymore after I saw this episode. And to make it even worse, they end the episode where Sam is with another woman and he is feeling her up and doing the same thing with her. And Sam's friend, it's treated like a joke. Like, oh, look, there's the friendly rapist with his friendly next victim. And then they ride off and leave. And it's like, oh, gross. Just absolutely gross. Number 12 is Psych Season 2, Episode 13, Lights, Camera, Homicidio. This is actually a great episode, except for this one subplot. So at the police department, Juliet, she is one of the main characters, and she sees that there's this new female cadet, and she wants to be friendly with her, and the cadet is like a total bitch, and she's not nice, she's not friendly. It's just really like cringe to watch their interactions. So Juliet buys her a cupcake, and next thing you know it, the chief is yelling at Juliet for doing that because she says that the police cadet says that she tried to sexually assault her or sexually harass her. And basically it turns into this really cringeworthy lecture where the chief says, women in the police force, they can't be friends and they can't be friendly with each other because they have to pretend to be like men or something. Like, it is so like gross and backward and just fucking retarded. And yeah, it really, really bad. Like, nobody who likes the show likes that too. Like, everyone who loves the show on Facebook, all of them mention how that subplot is retarded. Number 11 is Hannibal Season 3, Episode 13, Wrath of the Lamb. Ugh. This is exhausting talking about 25 episodes. So, Hannibal Season 3 rushed through 3 seasons worth of storylines. Not only that, but they decided to end their series on the most cringeworthy way possible. So, let's see. I mean, how did it happen? See, I can't even really remember because I hate it so much. Like, I love Hannibal Seasons 1 and 2, even though there were some cringeworthy gender, race swaps. But Season 3 was just abysmal. And Hannibal is in a police van, and Will, the main character, he's following them. But then we see that the Red Dragon serial killer kills the police in the van and helps Hannibal escape. But then the cringeworthy thing is that the Red Dragon, we see him off in the distance, and he drives away from the scene. And it's like, and it's this bullshit thing where Hannibal says the predator doesn't want to get to his prey. He wants to play with it first. And it's like really, really stupid. And I remember, like, when Safi and I were watching it, we laughed at it. And then Hannibal and Will go to this house in the middle of nowhere to have wine or something, and talk about more pretentious garbage. And they're waiting for the Red Dragon to come, and there actually is a pretty cool fight sequence where it's just brutal. They're like chopping each other to pieces and blood's going everywhere, and Hannibal and Will team up and kill the Red Dragon together, and it's actually really, really cool. And it's just too bad that, like, that one cool thing is hidden amongst the trash. And then I think they push him off a cliff. But the worst part is that after that, they ruin the moment, and they play this, like, James Bond-esque song called Love Crime. So they're basically, like, implying that Hannibal and Will love each other, and they committed this crime together. And then Hannibal and Will, they're two straight men, straight characters, and the writers force them to be gay. And they have this really gay thing where, like, they're rubbing each other, and they're hugging each other, and they're gonna kiss, and they're really close to kissing. And then all of a sudden, Will pulls Hannibal off the cliff while they're playing the song. And it's just, it's just so cringeworthy. It's like, it's just beyond cringeworthy. Like, the showrunner of the show is gay. And so this was basically his fantasy to force these main characters to be gay for each other, even though they're not gay at all. They've never been gay. They're established as straight characters. And so, but it's not surprising because he had already turned another character in the show lesbian, which that was another cringeworthy episode. So episode 10 is Chucky, Season 2, Episode 4, Death on Denial. This is, and I might have to split this up into 2 parts, but I don't know. I will try not to. If it gets to an hour, I will just have to, though, unfortunately. Ugh. So, in the middle of Chucky Season 2 actually being pretty good, they had this really cringeworthy episode, and it's all about Tiffany, the Jennifer Tilly character, having a murder mystery dinner party, and she invites over Glenn and Glenda, her supposed children, and right off the bat, they did something really bizarre, where they cast this woman to play the 2 characters, and then they make up that Glenn and Glenda are quote-unquote non-binary. And so the whole episode is basically all about them, and it's like this agenda story where there's a butler, and he doesn't give a fuck about their stupid pronoun bullshit. And so then somebody kills the butler, and what do you know? It was Glenn and Glenda, because they didn't like that their pronouns were not used properly. And just... Ugh. Number 9 is The X-Files, Season 4, Episode 5, The Field Where I Died. This was really cringeworthy fan fiction, where they spend the whole episode talking about how Mulder and Scully are actually reincarnated from Civil War soldiers, and it's really dumb. It's really, really dumb, and there's lots of cringeworthy moments. There's a moment where Scully tears up and destroys a historic photograph that she stole. There's a moment where Mulder cries and has like a past life hypnosis thing. He cries like a bitch. There's a moment where he loses his forever love or something. There's a moment where he's like drooling over this girl, and he really wants to interrogate her because he finds her attractive, and like just so many like cringe in this episode. Cringe moments. Number 8 is Bates Motel, Season 5, Episode 5, Dreams Die First. Season 5 of Bates Motel was actually pretty good up to this point. You know, I was really liking it, even though I knew that they were going to rush it to an end a couple of seasons early. I was really liking the season. But then they had this episode, and it's all about how Norman wakes up, and he doesn't know what happened, and something happened the previous night, who knows, and he wants to try to figure out what happened. So he retraces his steps to a gay club, and he finds out that he blacked out, and he had sex with the gay guy from the gay club, while he was the personality of his mother. And it's gross because the mother's personality, she did it to like punish him or something. Like, it was really, really weird. And it was so cringeworthy because it was like, once again, you have these writers and they're living out their little fantasy where, you know, they want Norman Bates, a straight male character, to be gay. And so they have him have sex with a guy in this episode against his will. I mean, he was not doing that because he wanted to. He was doing that while he was somebody else mentally. And it was very, very gross. And it was the worst episode of the whole season. Number 7 is Hell on Wheels, Season 5, Episode 9, Return to the Garden. This episode, it breaks barriers in cringeworthy levels. So, Colin, he searches for his Mormon wife, Naomi, because he ends up marrying her because it's what's right. And he searches for her after he goes to find her at the Mormon fort, and he finds out that everyone at the fort has the plague, and that Naomi and their son, they ran away together to escape the plague. Well, Colin finds them in Season 5, Episode 8, after spending that whole season trying to track them down, which, by the way, it was a year in between Seasons 5A and 5B. So, it was like all this time that he spent searching for Naomi. Well, he saves Naomi and their son from imminent danger when the arch nemesis of the series was going to kill them both. And he had a gun and he was hunting them down, and it was really scary. Colin saves them, and he takes the arch nemesis. He handcuffs himself to the arch nemesis and takes him to be hung, finally. And he finally has him brought to justice. And after doing all that, and he comes home in this Return to the Garden episode, and he finds out that Naomi has a new husband, and she's been with him for the whole time. Because, as I was talking about in the Ant-Man 3 review video, there's this really cringeworthy agenda where if a woman is without a man for more than 5 minutes, she'll just open her legs for anyone that wants her to. And that's what this whole episode about. It's all about how his wife, after he searched and searched to find her, she is going to now be with another man, and she will not allow him to see their son ever again. And so the ultimate cringeworthy part is at the end of the episode where Colin says goodbye to his son. And it's really depressing, it's gross, it's sickening, and it's so fucking disappointing. And it's really, really bad. It's really, really bad. Number 6 is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Season 4, Episode 19, New Moon Rising. Believe it or not, this is the first time that I ever saw an SJW agenda in full force in a movie or a TV show. When I was a kid, I was able to spot and see when they would do these agendas without anyone even labeling them. I would see something like this, where they changed the character of Willow and turned Willow into a lesbian. And they turned her lesbian and gave her the shitty love interest Tara. And she's one of the worst love interests in television show history. And she ends up being used as a plot device so that Willow will turn evil in Season 6. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Season 4. Anyways, this episode is all about Oz. And Seth Green, apparently he was really busy and he could not have any time to play Oz, the werewolf character. So they had to find a way to write him out of the show. So instead of him coming back and then getting killed or having some sort of a really tragic thing, they do something even worse. And they turn Willow lesbian, and she is already dating Tara because, Oz was away from her. So her legs just had to open for whoever wanted her to open them. So she opened them for Tara. And so now she will not ever be with Oz again. And it's just such a negative episode, and I remember just hating this episode as a kid. If I would watch season 4, I would skip past this episode because I knew this was the SJW agenda episode, and I was like, no, I'm not watching that trash. That's not the character. You know, they could have gotten rid of Oz without turning Willow lesbian, and the fact that they acted like Willow was a lesbian the whole time was just fucking retarded. Willow was never lesbian. She's still not lesbian. Just because they want to pretend like she is, that doesn't make it so. I remember those first couple of seasons. She was clearly not lesbian in any way, shape, or form. So I think I will have to split this up into 2 videos, so sorry. The next 5 episodes will take some time to talk about, let's just say. So, excuse me, sorry. So please like this video, comment, tell me, have you died from cringe yet from listening to these terrible trash episode plots? And then please subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see more honest movie reviews and honest TV reviews. Goodbye, everybody. See you soon.